got to get out of here a little before 4.
Got it.
So I wanted to explore today, I'd like to explore today what people have heard, been in meetings about. Joy, I know you've been in touch, for example, with uh, Jenny Haruyama's office a bit, possibly with the chief's office. I'm just curious about, what anybody has heard about the work that they're doing together. I have a general sense of um, how council, this is um, putting together a citizen-based review board, committee, commission, whatever, um, is on council's mind. They've thought about it. Um, I think they're generally in favor of something, but none of us knows what. So again, it's all kind of exploratory. Joy, would you agree at this point?
Yes, and I did have a conversation with Jenny. She was very generous with her time, and it was lovely to sit down and chat with her. And when I brought up the citizen review or citizen oversight, a word we will not use in public, but we're working on a better word. She's enthusiastic about the concept and about the need for some sort of review process or committee or something, because no group is self-policing, pardon the pun. Though when I pressed on separate, outside, looking in, community-based, I did get some pushback that there would be one group and it would involve the police and not two that would not involve the police. So I'm a little confused because we have been pretty particular from the beginning of outside oversight as objective, or at least perceived to be objective, which is more validating for the police and more validating for the community. And I think it lends itself to community members being more able to come and voice their concerns without fear of reprisals.
Did she give any exposition on the pushback on what she and Ron, so I assume this is what she and Rhonda are coming up with?
Yes.
And is there some backstory to that? Is there justification? Is there any kind of, what thinking is going into taking that approach? Do you know?
My impression, and I don't have, it was within the flow of the conversation, but coming away and thinking about it, my takeaway impression, not quoting anybody, was that the city has kind of been on autopilot for a long time and moved in a direction for a long time. This has never happened within the city. And so the concept of setting up a single oversight that the police chief is involved in, who has never had oversight, is one thing. And we're talking about having an outside body of citizens looking in is a different thing. And I don't know if it was because I was inarticulate or inelegant in my explanations or what, but that was my takeaway.
Okay. I'm disturbed that
we've been clear. Yeah.
That, well, if you're bringing the message that they're concerned about oversight, this has nothing to do with oversight. This is not what I've been. Oh, Jenny Haruyama is the new city manager.
City manager.
Oh, okay.
We've never had one of those before
Under
either.
the,
Yeah, I know about that part. I just didn't know her name.
And it's a new form of government and everyone is still swimming.
yeah,
Okay.
I think we all
As you all
understand.
may have seen in the first meeting.
Yeah.
Um,
And she even remarked, Jen even remarked that it was remarkable to her that in the year between we passed this new form of government and she getting here, really the city did nothing or didn't take things up. And that the city council is used to taking up things that are no longer part of what they do anymore. So it's wasting time and energy because they were unclear about what's delegated to the city manager appropriately and what remains for the city council. They're used to running the whole show. And so there's still some of that figuring out processes and like a year of getting nothing done. That would,
well, yeah, we all sat around and watched them do, I mean, that guy.
I
but
spoke about it.
That's irrelevant. Back again.
Now there's a lot to clean up because not only
I
is it
sat
new, but now it's a year behind.
we all now it didn't okay. That's vaguely interesting to what we're talking about here. At the I don't know December, November, October meeting of at our regular HREC meeting, Captain Alan
Wolfs.
What?
Alan Julfs.
Thank you.
AJ?
We were anyway. There was a dialogue going on that he was involved with, and the subject of the subject of our work, of this subcommittee's work, was on the table, and I went to some lengths to reassure him that we were not interested, that oversight was not what we're talking about, that we are talking about review and
Yes.
collaboration. So I said that we will never use the word oversight. This isn't about oversight. I'm not interested in looking over anybody's shoulder or second guessing line officers. That's not what I'm interested in doing. What I'm interested in doing is creating a space for community and resident involvement on a board, committee, whatever it winds up being called, to be able to better understand day-to-day operations of the police department, what they do when they're out in the world doing their jobs. And if there are incidents that raise questions that could lead to discipline that are out of the ordinary, and in Beaverton, thank God, out of the ordinary basically means something violent, then that board would have an opportunity to learn more about that. Not to talk about, not to be in opposition with, or in particularly be in writing or submitting critiques of what happened.
We're not doing run reviews, in other words.
What?
We're not doing run reviews. We're doing incident debrief kind of thing.
Yeah. To, as a start, I mean, 5 years from now, I don't know, everybody's going to be more comfortable with it, or it will have established its bona fides, and council and BPD will understand it better. My point is that if Jenny and Rhonda are thinking this is about oversight, they're wrong. And I can't seem to be able to get either of their attention. So if you, Joy, or Paulo, who's a fly on the wall and not really here, can fix it up so that I can actually sit with them for 15 or 20 minutes or 30 minutes and tell them that, because I can be articulate about it because I've been thinking about it for a year and a half. And it's pretty well solidified in my head.
With Jenny, Spencer, you want to meet with Jenny? Or
Yeah,
was it
and,
both?
and,
Okay.
and Rhonda too, if she's available.
Well,
But
Aren't
definitely
they coming,
with Jenny.
aren't they coming to part 2 of the retreat?
that's the plan. Yeah. Jenny did communicate that March would be more appropriate because of council updates being available. The chief.
I'm lost.
Okay, so for a little bit of context, there's going to be a part 2 of the retreat, and Joy, please definitely feel free to jump in. In fact, do you want to talk about this piece? I can.
Sure. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I met with Jenny. We talked about that the city had not issued guidelines about COVID and opening and safe operations officially as a policy. And so we have to have a retreat. We really do, Spencer. You and I talked about
Our retreat.
our retreat. So the first one is a week from Saturday on my birthday at Beach Food Cartel. Unless something changes there, they've had, my friend is recovered from COVID. I'm like, well, we could move it somewhere else if we need to. And then part 2 will be virtual in March, a month later. And the reason it's set this way is if we could meet in person and do just a 6-hour day, that'd be great, but we can't do that in COVID. So we're gonna have a meal, we'll do meet and greet and talk about why each of us joined HRAC. We'll get to know each other a little bit and things like that, and eat. And the second part is when we decide what we're gonna do for the year. And the reason it's split the way it is with one session in February and one in March is that we still have annual things that HRAC does. We'll do them all at the beginning of the year while we're getting through training. We learn how we operate as a group together, which is beneficial. And the city, 1st of March, apparently, maybe, is issuing guidelines on how we're going to move forward during COVID. So once those are issued, then we'll plan whether we're having in person or virtual. I'm thinking virtual for part 2, but we've already met. We've already had a meal. We've already talked to each other. We know more about each other. Like, I don't know where on the beach Karen is. I want to hear about your beach house. I don't know what Kathy does and runs around doing. I would like to know. Spencer, you've been working on this for a year. I want to hear about that. We'll do that at lunch on February 5th. And then in March, we'll put together our year. Invited to this, like the retreat we had 2 years ago, I wanted the similar sorts of people. We needed a city representative. We had that gal who had got her start at the library. Remember, Spencer? She was like kind of an interim city manager kind of thing. So I requested Jenny. I'm like, while we're at it, let's get our city councilor. Let's get Ashley. Let's invite the mayor. Who can we have that we can meet and talk to each other instead of at each other? Get to know each other a little. Have a meal. Yeah, as a group. Jenny said she is very busy because she's catching up from a year of nothing happening. She would rather come to the second meeting when we're planning what to do for a year, rather than come to the meet and greet.
Okay. Well, that's your call, obviously.
We had to pick a day and get going.
I'm talking about a separate meeting. At the full HRAC meeting, we're not going to get into specifics about this group.
At our training at the retreat part 2, yes, we can.
I don't want to.
Okay.
I don't want to involve Well, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't want to involve the other 7 people on HRAC in a conversation like we're having right now. I don't want them. We have, we exist. We have our charter. We're going forward with it. It doesn't need to be reviewed or um, have a big long discussion, I don't think. Until we report back on this meeting, we'll report back on this meeting next week. And if people want to ask questions about it, that's great. But that's at a HRAC meeting. Maybe I'm not explaining myself correctly. If we're going to meet with city officials, I think they want to hear from us kind of what we'd like to explore this year. And we want to hear from them what is on the city's agenda for the year, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway.
Okay.
So, if I can real quick, Spencer, though, were you asking me to try to set something up for you and or in Jenny and or Chief Groshong to meet? Because I can initiate that.
Yeah, I'm concerned that Rhonda was at our last meeting. She wasn't, I can't remember when she was meeting, how many meetings she came to last year, and if this subject even came up while she was there. But clarity needs to be brought to the purpose of this subcommittee. It needs to be made clear to Jenny and to Rhonda what we're about. But we're not about oversight. I don't want to scare anybody. We're not going to use that word.
Okay.
The word we can use is review, or I don't care.
Yeah. One thing I'll say is, and then I'll stop after this. One thing I'll say is, Joy was able to meet with Jenny, and I kind of just initiated it. And I don't know, Joy, how easy it's been for you to just email Jenny and how responsive she's been. My experience has been is she is pretty responsive and she is open to if you want to just reach out to Jenny. So I'm happy to initiate or coordinate something between y'all, unless you feel comfortable reaching out to her directly.
Well, I have, and she and I spoke not long after she came on board, and yet in, I don't know, November or so, I sent her a note wanting to get together with her to talk about this.
Okay.
And she never responded. So,
okay.
Which surprised me.
Well, then I could follow up there for Jenny. I'll make a note to just follow up of Spencer's would like to meet with you if you're available. Can you reach out to Spencer? With Chief Groshong, I would say too that she knows all of you. You all know her, and it's the same deal that if you feel comfortable, you could reach out to Chief Groshong directly, and I'd be happy to provide that email. But same thing with Jenny. If you want me to follow up or do the coordination in between, I could do that.
That'd be fine. Thank you.
And lastly, because you asked earlier, it sounds like maybe if y'all wanted to put together a mission statement or something like that for this subcommittee, maybe that could help. So last thing I'll say.
Okay.
Oh, that's really directly related to what I wanted to ask is, Spencer, when you said that you wanted to communicate, you want to be clear about the purpose for the subcommittee and communicate that to the city. Given the information that you wanted us to read ahead of this meeting, I thought we were talking about oversight, because there was a whole article that you shared that was about why it needs to be about oversight instead of about review. So I'm pretty confused, and I would really appreciate a mission statement and some kind of clarity for myself. I mean, I'm very interested in how you described to me to have a citizen group that looks at what the police are doing, but that's all I know about it as a newcomer. So any clarity you can help me, that would be very helpful.
Could I ask some fundamental questions here? First of all, just a comment. Rhonda said she was going to be attending HRAC now and not another police officer. So we should be seeing her regularly. But my question is, a month or 6 weeks ago, City Council voted to hire somebody to audit the police policies, etc. And they were going to look into a review board. And at that time, I asked if HRAC could be involved with that, continue involvement. And how do you see this committee? It seems to me that this committee needs to try and get representation with what the city is doing and hold back with what we would like to do until we see some progress, just as the school resource officers, once there was a process to hire somebody and look into it, and HRAC has kind of held off during that process. How do you see this subcommittee interacting with what's going on at the city level?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know what's going on at the city level, and that's what I want to find out. I want to be informed, and I agree with you that that HRAC should have input and should have a seat at the table if indeed they're going forward with planning. The role that the subcommittee was created is to work with city government to create a citizen-led group to increase BPD transparency in day-to-day activity, policy, and incident reviews.
Can you send that to me in writing, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, Joy.
So we didn't hold off with the school resource officers. I was appointed to that committee, and
Right, but I mean,
so it just wasn't public.
yes. And surely if an HRAC member is part of what Jenny has planned for the city, then, I mean, the rest of HRAC is holding off about SROs right now, right?
So, well, when I tried to give an update, I got stepped on my dory, so I shut up. And then
Oh,
the last meeting we had, the only thing this subcommittee has voted on is that if there's anything going on with the city, that one of us be involved in that subcommittee with the city. It's actually the only thing we've ever voted on as a group here. So you're on the same page.
I can't
So
hear you.
it's,
I'm sorry.
so we're on the same page. We already voted as a subcommittee that if something, we move forward with something, the city moves forward with something and asks for a volunteer like they did with the school resource officers, that it's a member of the subcommittee that gets appointed to that group.
Yeah,
They're good at involving us. So we already took that vote. We already decided that. And it was decided also, we talked about it at the HRAC meeting, and it was the group's recommendation, as I recall, that it was one of us. So even though we as a subcommittee voted on it,
right.
it was consensus. It's the obvious choice.
Yes.
When it goes to public comments and public sending things out to hire people with public money, that process by definition needs to be pretty dark so that there's no undue influences or cross-contamination. So once that subcommittee with the city went forward to hire a group to do the study of SROs in schools, that whole process got dark so that it could run the same way you run a medical test. where it's
Just a
blind.
minute. I'm sorry, I'm dog sitting.
So that process is blind by necessity, but I'm on that committee. And now
Yes,
we're my part. So once that's over, then we'll get back together and do the results.
so could HRAC officially offer Spencer to be on, to work with them on the policing stuff? Joy?
Oh, I thought you were asking Spencer. Sorry.
No,
What-
I was asking you, I mean, you know the steps to follow
Well,
more than I do.
if we, you know, if we can set up if we get a meeting, if I can get a meeting with Jenny and or Rhonda, or maybe Rhonda separately, I don't really care. I just want to be able to look them in the face and hear from us directly what we're not going to do, what we're not doing. We're exploring at this point. We don't have a goal. We don't have a stated goal as to what's going to come out the other end of all of this. We don't have a stated goal that says we want an oversight commission that is going to have disciplinary powers over rank and file police officers.
Well, we haven't had that discussion. And so Spencer, might I suggest that instead of us deciding what we're not, that we decide what we are?
And this is what we are.
Okay, well, let's talk about that.
We are formed to work with city government to create a citizen-led group. To
Stop.
increase BPD transparency and day-to-day
Stop.
activity policy. Yes.
Read that first phrase again.
Purpose of the subcommittee is to work with city government.
That's it. That's why they think it's one integrated, including the police and everybody else. All of these things come down to technicalities. And do we want to work with them like a person on a group, or do we want to coordinate, or do we want to liaison? We need a better word here.
Okay.
What do we want to do? And so maybe we list what we want to do and write that statement last. You write your introduction after you complete the paper. After you do your research. You make all your points, and then you write the introduction, and then you write the conclusion. So maybe,
Well, that sounds more like a full-blown mission statement. I'm
well,
just talking about something to be able to converse about.
isn't that a mission statement?
I have another question. Oh, is it frozen?
Nope, I
No.
see you, Karen.
We can see
Okay, my question is there a problem we're trying to solve, or is this more proactive because police abuse has been and is always going to be a possible issue? Or, you know, I'm sorry, I'm new, so I just don't know where we're coming from on this.
The problem is lack of communication and understanding from BPD to the community, and in reverse, community to BPD. Understanding what what BPD operations are on the one hand, and what community needs are for public safety on the other. That's as I see it. Yep.
To build on what Spencer said, is a preview of our meeting, with our timeline of how HREC got started. And we started in 2008, as I recall, Paolo. And there has been a documented communication problem, lack of communication, which I guess is a problem, between the police department and the public since then. So this is year 15 of an issue. So I think we have enough time to demonstrate that there's a break here.
How does that communication problem show itself?
Well, I will tell you that when my very first meeting, we were giving the stop data. We were at the community center and the police showed up. It was the first meeting after Rhonda had been appointed interim police chief for city of Beaverton. She walked in a suit. She looked amazing and she was wearing a sidearm, as she's required to do on duty. And when she took her jacket back, and you can see the sidearm, every person of color flinched noticeably. I'd say that's a problem. That they would consider that that would be an issue in this room. I will also say that every time I've been stopped by the police, not one time ever have I ever worried that I was gonna die. I'm guessing you either.
Yeah, I understand that big issue.
And what we can do here is create a bridge for communication so that if you did get stopped, that anyone who got stopped would not worry. Or anyone who saw Rhonda take her jacket off and there's her sidearm would not worry that it would get used on them.
Question. Would Rhonda and the other police consider the subcommittee to be a communication tool? Because it works both ways.
We decide what it is and we haven't yet, right, Spencer?
Haven't decided what?
What we are yet.
No, that's what we're here to do. That's why
Yes,
we're an exploratory committee. We're
right.
exploring.
But we are not the PR department for the police. That's on them. HRAC, as I read the charter, is for citizens of Beaverton. We represent the citizens of Beaverton to wherever. To the school district who put cops in schools, to the community asking about, with the art project, asking about things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we're the place that residents of the city can come to if they
And feel safe
have concerns about
with an issue. Yes.
human rights.
Yes,
And that's whether it's getting utilities hooked up or interactions with the police. It's the whole.
or a place to walk safely with their disability, or walking at night, or yes, that's us. We are on the side of the community.
Hey, Spencer, so I have the first line of the statement that what we're about, work with city government to create a citizen-led group. What comes after that?
To increase BPD's transparency in day-to-day activity, policy, and incident reviews. I guess,
Um,
well, again, this is an exploratory committee. We're not, I don't believe, writing a mission statement for what the ultimate committee would be. The created board or committee, commission, whatever it turns out to be. We don't know what it's going to turn out to be. I think we just feel that there needs to be a venue that is citizen-based. I'm sorry, we cannot use that word either. That is resident or community-based. Well, the goal is to increase communication from the community to the police department. So the police department can better understand what the community safety needs are in Beaverton. And if BPD wants to respond to that by putting out press releases or whatever. I'm not a public relations person, and neither are. That's not what we're here to do. Anyway, I don't know what else to say.
Well, I have another question. So if we're an exploratory committee, it sounds like the first thing you wanted to do to explore was to meet with either Rhonda or Jenny and just talk to them about what they're doing currently, because it's...
I want to talk to them about to help them understand what I've just been saying to you and what you've been writing down, Karen. And then hear from them if they have a concept. I want to know what it is. I think we need to know what it is. And so
they agree with the premise that there's a communication problem.
I don't know yet.
Okay, because first, I think it was Joy said in response to my question that there was a lack of communication and understanding from BPD to the community and then vice versa. But what you focused on, Spencer, was the vice versa, that you want some kind of a way for the community to tell BPD how they're not feeling safe or what they need, right? But
That's certainly, yes.
right, that's what you said. So, but when you talk about the police department's transparency in day-to-day activity policy and incident reviews, that's not the community telling the police what
No,
they, that's something completely different to me.
It's informing the community. There is no venue for
I get that. Yeah.
for any kind of communication to take place, and that's partly what this is about.
Okay, so I go back to my question. If it's an exploratory committee, how are we going to explore? What can I do besides sit here and take notes?
When we redefine, when we set this up, and I said work with city government, actually I was thinking about city government leadership. I was thinking about the council. Figure out, be able to interact with them to the point where they're willing to create a new body or board or whatever it is, whatever the process is that created HRAC in the first place. I mean, I don't know if it was, whoever, I don't know if it was Rod Drake or whatever his name was. Back in '93, I don't know who the mayor was, and it's irrelevant. But at some point, somebody said, we need a human rights commission. At some point, somebody said, we should have an arts commission. We should have a bicycle commission. We should have a safe walkways commission. Whatever the hell it is that all these commissions and committees do, somebody thought it up. I want to know what that is and get that on that person's agenda to begin thinking about doing this.
Which is to improve police community communication. Is that right?
Yeah, that is a side, that is an outcome, one of the outcomes.
That's what we want, right, as an outcome.
Right.
Yes, and of course, communication is a two-way street. And so every time I hear improved police communication, my hackles go up, because it takes at least two sides to be communicating in truthful, authentic, respectful ways. But I'd like to go back to making a, Spencer, it sounds like you would really like a separate entity, not HRAC, but I'm going to call it a review board because I don't know what else to call it. And if city government is in charge of setting up a review board, they have to see the need for one. They have to see the need for a review board. And I still contend that an audit of the policies and practices, if there is indeed a need for one, that will be very obvious at the end of a good audit. So I think that asking them for one is putting the cart before the horse, because we really want to share some fundamental beliefs. The one belief being, we could use one. We need one. And that need needs to be shown for people to believe it.
I think that not white people see it. There isn't a person
You
of
think that what?
I think
I'm
that
sorry, I didn't.
People of
there's a lot of privilege. I think people of color see the need, and I think that that has not been heard. And if you go to and we talked about this last year, if you go to the place on the police department website where you can file an incident report or a complaint or whatever you want to call it, you had something that didn't go right. The reasons are, it's hard to categorize when you have a problem into the categories they put up for reasons that you're contacting them. And so they can say, oh, we had a conversation about it, it's solved. Well, that isn't necessarily so. The place where you go, if you have a problem, is the people who were the problem. We've seen this in sexual harassment. You don't go to the person harassing you, if it's your boss, and expect to get anything except fired. The EEOC created a process where you get to go to anywhere else and have your concern listened to by an outside, objective, non-conflicted group, body, identity of something. So it doesn't
yes,
get lost. And we are, I think Spencer's wanting to do that so that there's a place to go that isn't conflicted out before you say hello.
Yes, and I agree totally with that. I guess it's the process that I'm not in agreement with. I believe that if the city is going to go for it, we should join the city and not be on our own about
The
it.
thing the city
I-
wants to do isn't that. Like the whole EEOC process, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call it the EEOC process for sexual harassment. Women, you know what I'm talking about. You can go outside your organization or your chain of command and have your complaint dealt with instead of swept under the rug. After years of sexual harassment, and we all grew up with it, are you following me? It's an outside thing. What the city is talking about doing is an internal audit. How are we compliant with state law? How are we preventing another George Floyd from happening? That is not the process of the EEOC thing. You're a community member and you had an incident, you need somewhere to go with that. That's different than the city needs to organize how their police is overseen by the city manager who's their boss now. They have been working independently without oversight forever. So there's no one making sure they're complying with best practices, local, regional things. No one's doing that. No one's making
Right.
the people they hire actually represent the cultural diversity and ethnic diversity of our city. No one's doing that. No one but Rhonda's making sure that these people aren't flaming Nazis. Seriously, they're not screening for that. They're not even screening to make sure that their personal belief system comes with the city's statements of value. They're not checking that. That's what the city's putting together. We are talking about the EEOC thing. Those are not the same.
Yes, so the last time I heard this at the city council, they put aside money to hire an outside expert to do the audit. What has changed
Yes.
since then?
I've never heard that. I don't know anything
Mhm.
about it.
And that's not
Yes.
the process we're
No
talking
one's-
about.
No one's called A-Track up on the phone, knowing what we're working on, and said, "Hey guys, we're gonna do this." Nobody said that to us. I don't know anything. I don't know anything about it, Kathy. I haven't seen it anywhere.
Me neither.
Nobody's told me about it. My point is this: we had a member of A-Track that overlapped with me for a couple of years. And they told a story about, I can't even remember why the police came into their apartment, but the police came into their apartment to interact with a teenage young man, and over whatever incident it was. And they treated him violently and without explanation. And, they were, multiple police officers in the apartment, outside the police. Anyway, it was extraordinarily intimidating. And oh, by the way, this family were people of color. And anyway, this member of our commission told us this story, and ever since then I've wondered, well, that's a great story. How many other people have this story to tell,
Right.
and where do they go to tell it? I never hear about it. If they put it up if they file a complaint on the police department website, what happens to that? And
Right.
they call, anyway, there has to be a venue, there has to be a place, and
Right.
HVAC is supposed to be it, but nobody knows about it. So let's fix that.
Okay,
And
I'll be right back.
It needs separate attention.
We totally agree on that. I'll be right back. I need to get my city council notes. Hopefully, I've written my own notes for the meeting where I heard this, okay?
Did I mischaracterize there, Spencer? We need a place like the EEOC Commission where you can
Yeah,
go.
well, I mean, yeah, I don't want to cloud it with EEOC and sexual harassment. We need an objective outside party, a third party, to whom people can go and have a conversation.
But
If
did
if you're an employee of the city, you can go to HR, and there's someone in HR that you can work with
Yeah.
to deal with that. But if you're a citizen of the city, you don't.
Right.
Did I hear you say, Spencer, that HRAC is supposed to be the place people can go, but people just don't know about it?
Yep. I don't
So
think
shouldn't we address that? I mean, if we already have a place where people could go, why do we need another place? How are people going to know about this other place?
so HRAC is like an umbrella that incorporates all city operations.
Right.
And I'm focusing on a single purpose community-based group to work on BPD issues specifically.
How
Which-
bad do we feel like the
Right.
issues are beyond the police?
What?
Well, you're saying that HRAC is this umbrella for any kind of issues that people might have with the city, right?
For
Involving human rights.
For human rights. Okay, so is that a big problem
I
in
don't-
general for people of color or other people who are marginalized groups? Or is it mostly the police we're talking about? I mean, usually people are interacting with the police more than any other part of the city, it would be my guess, right? I understand what you're saying about wanting to focus on the police. I'm not sure I buy yet the need to have a completely separate group if HRAC is here and could function as that group.
This is not an HRAC. Ultimately, this is not an HRAC board operating under the auspices of HRAC. It is a separate commission or committee or board
This is what you want.
established by the city. That's why you have to work with government. Established by the city with buy-in from the city, given some mission by the city, with some weight behind it, that they have a place at whatever table it is we're talking about, to give feedback and to hear feedback.
Karen, are you from Oregon?
Oh, yeah. Well, I wasn't born here, but I've lived here for 40 years.
Did you know that Oregon is the only state in the nation that was admitted to the union with an exclusion clause? That if
Yeah,
Black and male, you had to leave within 2 years if you were male, 3.
yeah.
And that because Portland wouldn't let Black people or people of color live in their city limits, they came to Beaverton, that within major corporations right here in Beaverton, and it was published in the newspaper, that there are white supremacy cells that have operated within those large corporations here in Beaverton. It's a big deal, white supremacy here. And so I have not personally experienced the kind of discrimination and marginalization I'm talking about. But there should be a place for people to go just for that one issue. And HRAC handles a number of other things. A lot of other things that have to do with all other human rights within the city. So to only deal with police communication issues like we're talking about would take the entire commission away from what we're already doing. It is
Okay.
significant enough, I think, to at least do an exploratory committee, to put at least an ad hoc commission in place for citizens to have a place to go without hoping that if they submit a complaint to the police department website, it doesn't get swept under the rug or minimized or marginalized.
Or if they're afraid of being identified
Retaliation.
or being singled out for retaliation, or if their status in the community is questionable, is if they feel vulnerable, they may not, you know what, they may not want to talk to the police, but they may have a valid concern. So, Kathy, I appreciate your notes, that you have notes from council. Is there an ordinance or a council resolution?
Yeah, I cannot find my notes.
Yeah, Nadia
So
last
maybe
year
I
appointed
was so
me after
surprised. I
the
have-
budget passed. Nadia appointed me to a $50,000. Nadia Hassan, who Karen, who was our council liaison last year. She pointed me to a $50,000 line item under operations somewhere that was going to be used to perhaps do what it is you're talking about, Kathy, to do something about this process. I want to find out about that.
Yeah,
And the only way I can
I
figure out how to
think-
do that is to ask a direct question. What are you doing with $50,000?
right. I have a thank you to them written down in my notes on December 7. So it may have been a meeting before that. December 7, is that when you came, Joy, and they talked about HRAC recommendations. I will need to get back to you. Maybe they even have minutes on that meeting. They've been catching up with minutes. But yes, I think asking them what's going on right now, and that, here's what we would like to see, instead of, it sounded almost adversarial to me as I was hearing Spencer and Joy talk.
No, the point of this is not to be adversarial. Well, that's the point I'm trying to make.
Okay.
There has to be city buy-in. There has to be God, what is the word I'm looking for? There has to be. I'm not looking for permission from either the manager's office. We don't need permission. We are an established commission. We can do anything we want.
According to our thing, our,
Within our bylaws. I'm not looking for permission. What I'm looking for is collaboration.
Yes.
I don't
And
need to get
so-
the city manager's permission to do anything, and I don't need
Right.
the police department's permission to do anything. What I'm looking for is
Right.
collaboration and cooperation and
Right.
buy-in.
so Kathy,
Yes.
And so the point,
And just a
I
minute.
want to know how know how to get to that.
Yes, and I totally agree that meeting with them, asking what their progress is, and saying, we want to be part of this, is not adversarial and is reminding them that we're paying attention and want this to get going and want to be involved. And I don't think that will preclude this committee working on its own also. Yeah, Joy.
So
Or
my
Paolo.
thought is that what we did in HRAC during our police review thing, and we issued the recommendations, which I read into the record at the city council meeting in December. That is actual police policy that we're trying to have input on, and that is one thing. What Spencer is doing is a different thing, and perhaps, and I know that you're very much interested in the police reforms that we worked with the chief or the, okay, all of that. This is a different thing, and perhaps this is not a match for your interest. Because it's one thing to affect the internal police policies as we tried to do, adopting a can't wait, taking SROs out of schools, those things. This is not that. This is people in Beaverton need a place to go.
Oh, yes.
They're saying heard. That's a completely different thing. And it may not be your passion if that's
Oh,
frustrating
yes.
to you. And this is a mismatch. That's no harm, no foul. This might
I'll
not
speak,
be a subcommittee for you.
excuse me, Joy. I'll speak about my own passion, okay?
I
I
appreciate that.
see my two things have been A, an audit, and B, review board, I'll call it citizen community review board, because when things happen in the dark, it's toxic. I want two things, not just one. And I think all of you want an audit. Joy, you had done kind of an informal that you explained to me with some friends of yours who knew you've worked with police, you know more about the legalities of policies than I do. And we definitely needed a point-by-point audit and still do. We also need an ongoing review board. We need both of them.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
What I was hearing was that, and those two things cannot be the same. They need.
No, they're not the same. Yeah,
Right.
but
So
they're
I was
both
just making
very
space
essential.
for
Yeah.
that. But these are two different things, and it's
Yeah.
easy because you've been here for the one. This is the other. This is the other.
Thank you, Joy.
Yeah. If the police department, along with the city manager's office, wants to do an internal audit of the police department policies and procedures, they can do that.
Yes.
And that'll be an audit, and when the audit's done, the results will be published. And I want to and there needs to be a community oversight panel, group, commission, review, education, collaborative situation, non-defensive, non-confrontational, non-adversarial.
Exactly.
Yes. Would you be satisfied with the result of an internal audit?
Well, if that's what they're going to do, then that's what they're
not.
going to do. I mean, we can say to them, "Are you doing an audit?" And yeah, we're hiring a person, and they're going to do an internal audit and do a best practices review, and whatever the hell it is an audit of a public department is. I don't know. I've never looked at an audit before or paid attention, so I don't know if there's an opportunity for community input, or if there's an opportunity for HRAC to be part of the audit, or if it's even HRAC's place to be part of the audit. So I don't know anything about police best practices?
Um,
Who am I to, anyway,
when you meet with Jenny and Rhonda, and I am sure that you will be meeting with them, ask them about that, because audits are generally done from outside the particular unit. And that's what I personally am looking for. Yeah.
okay. Well, yeah, when I say internal audit, I mean, they hire somebody to do an audit and then give them the report.
Give us the report. Yeah. Give the city the report. Yeah.
Okay. So for reporting back to HRAC purposes, our second meeting continued to define or establish what it is the goals of the long-term goals of the subcommittee are. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
We haven't reached a conclusion. Other than, I've talked to a couple city council members who were supportive. They're not going to form a commission and do the work. They're going to respond to the work. So the work, whatever that means. And it's probably not their job to do the investigation or do the exploration or to create the mission statement for whatever this ultimately is going to turn into. But when I said work with government, I meant work with them, talk to them quietly, not on the record, and bring them along.
Quiet collaboration.
Yeah, bring them along. If if the remaining Mark has input to give, please give us input. If Lacey has input to give us input. I'm looking for collaboration from everybody, because at the end of the day, if this thing's going to happen, it's going to require input from it. It's going to require buy-in if it's going to have any substance, any if the work that it does is going to have any impact in the city, it's going to need buy-in from the various parties.
Right.
So bring them along, and that's part of, to meet with the city manager and the chief of police is to both let them know what we're about, that we're exploring, and to gather information from them about what they're thinking, and if they have plans, what are they? And I think it'll also be interesting to see if a body that they form that turns out to be what was originally called a chief's input group. What's that called? A place
Were you talking about the community academy?
the what?
No, a different input. I don't know which input group. Sorry.
There was something about a chief
Chief advisory board, maybe.
Advisory board, thank you.
Mhm.
If that's their plan, my question to us is, and to other people ultimately, does that preclude us from continuing on our path? My thought is no. That they can do that if they want, but we're over here. And if they want one of us or one of our members, commission members, to be on that advisory panel, we can do that. So,
Joy, what was the process for you being on SRO panel?
Call went out.
volunteered.
A call went out for a volunteer that when they put, the city council decided they were gonna commission a study and they wanted to put a member of HRAC. Paolo put out an email saying, does anyone have the time and the bandwidth to do this? And then he called me and said, Joy, can you do this? Because I don't know that anyone responded, and I was delighted. So I said, yes, there was several meetings. It was very time consuming, a lot of reading. Because I read all of the proposals of the folks who applied, the companies that applied to do the study. So I had to read the listing as it went out and then all of the replies. And then we met several times to go through all of the points assigned to each organization. And then we had a big meeting where we scored everything and then said, is this consistent with how you guys felt? And it was. Narrowed it down, and in the last meeting that was scheduled, because it came down to only to a significantly very small number, that it didn't need to be narrowed further. The scores, there was a seriously high and very low. So we didn't need to thin further. And then the city took it from there and made an offer to the organization that won. But it was very time consuming.
So I'm wondering, it makes sense for Spencer to be our volunteer. And I'm wondering if you might mention that to them, Spencer, if that's legitimate. Or if it has to go through HRAC.
It does depend on availability. They had a requirement for hours, and here's the meeting schedule, and it was, you have to do it if you volunteer. So you can't just assume that any one of us could do it, depending on what's required.
Also, small detail, but just for clarity, I think too, if I recall back, I was asked to select somebody. And so I was really basing it off some of the folks who at that time when I was asked, it was really Joy, Dora, and Laurel who kind of led the work for developing the inquiry sessions and the recommendations. And I checked with those three, and I had asked Joy. Joy said yes. So very small detail, but I didn't put it out to the whole commission.
Perhaps we've taken this as far as we can today. In summary, I would like the opportunity to meet personally with the city manager and the chief of police and the police chief, and either together or separately, it doesn't matter to me. And it's just, anyway.
And I'll follow up with both of them. You have not reached out to Rhonda yet, though, right? You said, Spencer?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And I can reach out to Rhonda for you.
Okay.
So I took notes, Spencer, of how the conversation went. We didn't make any decisions except for what you just said. And it's not really a voted on decision. Do you want any, do you want any notes that I took, or should I just keep them for myself?
Why don't you give us your notes,
Okay.
just so we have them to fall back on when we meet again.
Yeah, and I'm happy to just generally be saving all these notes so I could share it with y'all just in case in the future. I'll basically just house all of it in a folder.
Maybe I send it to you, Paolo, and then you share it. Is that how that
I
goes?
could do that. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll do
Thanks,
that.
Karen. Should I go ahead and stop the recording?
Sure.
Anything else quick? I have a 4:30, so I need to get a 5-minute break.
Thank you, Spencer.
Thanks, you guys. I appreciate it.